not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
Crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Gav, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Is this Jason?
It is. How you doing? You're live on the air with the Liberty Brothers.
Hey, good to be here, guys.
It's great to have you, man.
Gavin, thanks for joining us. This is Jim. Appreciate you coming on. Let me give you a proper introduction.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Joining us on the line is Gavin Seim. Gav is a no-nonsense Liberty speaker and a frontline activist. He ran for U.S. Congress in 2014, turning his district upside down. He takes government lawlessness head-on, and he educates citizens on the Constitution and freedom. Gav, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon on the Liberty Brothers.
Yeah, great to be here, guys. How's things going?
Things are going great.
It's good, but, you know, there's also so much craziness going on in the world, man. I mean, it's really kind of getting scary as to what's happening in our country. And I know you are very much one of the people who says, you know, we're only going to have what we allow to happen. And you go out and you actually, you go out there and engage and kind of take a different approach than a lot of people because you're very positive with your message and you do go and engage on a regular basis. And
we have to. I mean, what can we do? You know, at this point, I think I probably speak for most of us. We never intended this. You know, we're normal Americans with businesses and families and hopes and dreams, and America's being torn away, and we have to stand up and do something about it.
I wholeheartedly agree. And you really have done that time and time again. Most recently, let's talk about what happened in court there. You had a video go up, I want to say it was middle last month, or maybe the beginning of this month.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks, probably the beginning of this month.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what happened there in the background. I know it kind of went viral, like your police officer video where you're pulling over the cops and talking to them. Tell us what the background was on that and kind of what happened and where things are now.
Well, the long story short, and let me just preface this by saying for people to understand everything that's being talked about, if you go to my blog, callmegav.com, you can find this post on the blog and the video and really understand what happened here. The quick backstory is that we have, as most of us know, a justice system that is broken. And I think most people recognize that the justice system is broken, but we don't really want to admit how bad it is. You know, we have rallies, we have Olympia, we have the Bundy Ranch, we have events where we stand up and we stand the line and we stand down tyranny and we make progress. And so we get encouraged by that. There's hope in that. And I think we have this situation where anything past the courtroom doors we're terrified of. We've allowed our judges and our courts to get to a point where you walk through those courtroom doors and your rights are nothing at that point. And in recognizing this increasingly, what precipitated this in Douglas County, Washington, and it's important to know that this is happening all over America. So this is actually an example of what's really happening all over America. I think just courts are the exception rather than the rule. In America today, you're innocent, not at all, unless you prove yourself innocent. You're guilty until you prove yourself innocent on your own dime, and justice is the best that you can afford. That's what it seems to come down to so often. This was initiated by a very small event. There was a young man, Tel Shasteen, who's a responsible guy that works 2 jobs, and he's driving home with my sister one night after going out to dinner, and he gets pulled over for speeding. So it's a fairly normal stop. He asks the officer, why am I being stopped? Now, in the normal world of officers doing their job and people expecting the basic element of respect, we would expect the officer to say, hey, I pulled you over for speeding. And instead of that, this bully Douglas County Sheriff, Deputy Evan O'Malley, comes up and he says, why am I being stopped? And the deputy says, well, I'm not going to tell you until you get your information. And so this driver is kind of arguing with the officer, And he's also going for his information. He's not refusing to give his ID and his registration and things like that. But he's saying, no, you have to tell me why I'm being stopped. And this is not only legal under the law, it's a basic common sense. If you're stopped on the highway late at night, it's perfectly reasonable to verify the reason for the stop and make sure that you're being stopped for a legitimate reason. You know, this coincides actually with conversations that we've had recently with unmarked cars and things like that, where do you really know who's stopping you? You know, do you really know why you're being stopped? So it's a perfectly reasonable question. Long story short, the officer opened the door, took him out of the car, and arrested him and charged him with a misdemeanor crime for failure to comply because he asked the officer a question. So what happened is he refused to bow down and lick their boots. He refused to make their deals, and he said, no, I want my jury trial that I'm guaranteed in the Constitution. So he took it to jury trial and represented himself. It was a misdemeanor charge, and I think that's a very positive thing. I think if people started representing themselves in misdemeanor charges and demanding their trial, it could really change the system, because they would have to back off. They couldn't afford to keep harassing and collecting these people if they demanded their trial for all these little things they're charging people for. That's a bit of a side note. Bottom line is, the prosecution, the county, they were blocking him every step of the way. We recognized that it didn't look like he was going to get a fair trial. And so what we did is put the word out and said, hey, the Patriots are going to show up at this court. Not to pick a fight. We're just going to show up at this court and make sure that due process is served and that this young man gets a fair trial, and make sure that, you know, to observe. And that's what we did. So we showed up. Myself and my brother Nathan were there, had been, you know, talking to Tell and helping him research legal stuff and things like that, and trying to figure out, okay, where are we going with this? And we also notified the court that we were going to be filming. So the defendant notified the court, which was Tell, that he was going to have a couple advisors with him just to help him out. That was myself and Nathan, and that we were going to be filming. So this is per the court rules that we sent this. We don't need permission for our First Amendment rights, but we were trying to be compliant and not pick a fight. We show up and sit down. The court hasn't even started yet. You know, the jury's getting organized and seated. They play them a video, etc. You know, they play them the video that says how great the government is and how they're a big part of that process, and the typical rhetoric that they're feeding into people. And then there's a break. And my camera, actually just my cell phone, is sitting there on the counter very unobtrusively on the defendant's table, where we're gathering his papers and he's getting ready to defend himself. And myself and the defendant step out for a few moments, and the police swoop in, and at the order of the judge, they grab Nathan, my brother, and drag him from the courtroom. Now, bear in mind, the judge has never entered the chambers yet. There's no arguments. There's no disruption being caused by the Patriots. All of this was precipitated by the judge sending out an order to say, hey, get those Patriots out of there. Get that guy out of there that's with Gavin and the guy that's filming, and we don't want anybody to be able to help Tell, is what this amounts to. So with no cause, with no crime, two officers surround Nathan. They grab him, and this is where history happens, because so often we see people stand up to their city council or their county commissioners, and they step up and they speak truth, and the police come and they drag them out, and everybody sits in their chair and does nothing. Don't be the slave. Don't be the person who sits silent while your neighbor is abused, because until we recognize that the suffering of our neighbor, the unlawful abuse of our neighbor is as evil as if it were us, we cannot restore liberty. You have to stand up for what's right. So this is where everything changed, because the Patriots in the room, there was probably 15 to 20 Patriots that had showed up here in this little courtroom. And they all stood up and said, whoa, what are you doing? And they blocked the door. And as these police officers are trying to drag Nathan out of the room, the police officers take Nathan and they use him as a human battering ram to bash through the Patriots that are blocking the door. And right about this time, you know, I was out grabbing a power cord in the car, and I'm charging back in with my backup camera, pulling it out of my pocket. And right about this time, as they're getting to the door, I'm coming into the room, and here's Nathan barreling out, you know, being used as a battering ram and hauled out of the room. So I charged in, and you see this on the video, and I charged in, and right about this time, for the first time, the judge comes in. And that's when I took the judge on, and I said, I don't know who you think you are, but you are bound by the Constitution. You took an oath to the Constitution, and you get my brother back in here. We followed the court rules. We're following the law, and we expect it to be respected and due process and the First and the Fourth and the Sixth Amendment to be respected. And so I actually carried on this oral argument with the judge for probably 5 minutes, and I refused to sit down and be silent. And I said, no, I'll sit down if you'll address this issue. I'll sit down if you'll return my brother, who was illegally removed from the courtroom, back to this courtroom. And eventually I said, you're in contempt of our court. Do we need to arrest you? And of course that didn't go over real big, but I didn't expect it to. I mean, I knew that we were in the lion's den here, but at some point we have to step up and step into the uncharted territory and say no more, and say we expect the law to be followed. I always go back to John Locke, and if you haven't read John Locke's second treatise, it's fairly short, and it really gives a phenomenal foundation for our Constitution and our liberty and for law itself. And it was written well before America. And he says when a magistrate, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says when a magistrate ceases to act within the authority that they've been given, in this case by we the people, when they cease to act within that authority, they cease to be a magistrate at that moment and they become a criminal. And this is something we really need to understand. When a police officer or a judge or an official, the moment they step outside the absolute law, the Constitution, the liberty that we placed on them, they're no longer an authority. They're a criminal. And I fully affirm that we have to act with principle. You know, we need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We need to be seeking peace, not looking to pick a fight. But we also have to be willing to stand up, and we will stand. That's the key here that the Patriots, I think we have to all realize, whether it's in the courtroom or out in the desert somewhere or at the Capitol in our state, we're there for peace. But by George, we will strap our sword to our side, and if we have to step up and defend liberty, we will.
Amen.
Well put.
Go ahead,
So,
Jim.
yeah, I mean, it was really something, and you really need to see the video rather than me try and explain the whole thing. You've never seen anything like this in a courtroom, and I'm really proud of the people that stood. I'm glad this is getting out. People are responding to it.
Now,
it's starting the message. It's a powerful thing what happened in there and the abuse that they carried out.
Now, Gav, you got arrested, right? In the end of it, your father was arrested as well. What happened? Was there any repercussions? Did they drop things? What happened from there?
No, at this point, I mean, they're not dropping it. They're out for vengeance. So what's happening is, I was arrested. They took me down to the floor and hauled me out. And then my dad was arrested. And, what he did was mild compared to me, but the judge ran out of the chamber. She left. So the judge wasn't even in there. And the sheriff then arrested my dad for contempt of court, which is ironic since the judge wasn't in there. And then later they changed the charges. I think they realized that, well, that's not going to work. There was no judge in there. And so the beauty is, and this is the key, this is a bold reminder, and I cannot emphasize this enough. You always turn a camera on. And if they say no cameras, that means you turn a camera on. Always, always, always. Because the moment this happened, that same day, the sheriff put a press release out to all the press, feeding them the lies, telling them their side of the story that was actually completely false. They ran with the story. The local media ran this story. The key here, and this is one of the keys to this case, is a First Amendment violation. What precipitated all this was us filming, okay? So you go back to the First Amendment, we were filming. There was a welcome guest of the mainstream media in that courtroom. And as I was being arrested, they're standing around filming. They're welcome. And the judge, after I was arrested, she's making everybody turn their cameras off. She says, we have a member of the media here. They're the only ones that are going to be allowed to record.
And you can see them, patting the guy's back, and you can see the rapport that's already there with that person who's supposed to be an unbiased reporter.
Right. This is the Wenatchee World Reporter, and they're shaking the hands of the police, and they're there as pals. They're there to support the statist agenda, and that's exactly what they did. They went out and reported a story that, if you didn't see what really happened, it looks legitimate. And we see this all the time. You see it in police reports. You see it in mainstream news. Assume if you read a police report or a mainstream article on something that happened like this, that you're reading lies. You have to anymore, because you need to question everything, because these people, the ones they're allowing in there, the ones that are carrying the message for the state, are professionals at writing things up in such a way so that they can arguably say they're not lying. They carefully word things in such a way, but in reality, the whole thing is a lie. In reality, everything they're saying, oftentimes in the mainstream media, is a clever lie to make the patriots or the person standing up to the system look like a radical nut job. And that's where this video came in, and that's why it's spreading so far. Is the video completely changes the story. It proves that the sheriff, Harvey Jesdal, is a liar. It proves that they were the ones that precipitated all this. It proves that they were the ones abusing. And had we not had that video, this is a very different story. So I'm always, as somebody who's always promoting the conversation, who writes about techniques for getting the conversation out, you have to have that video. And we knew that going in, and as you see in this video, there's all these different angles and all this stuff happening, because there was 3-4 people at a time from different directions recording this once it started going down. So this is unprecedented for a courtroom.
And really, we're seeing across the country. Sorry, Jim, I don't mean to be hogging the mic here. I'll let you jump in. But we're really seeing them really try to restrict our ability to do that and say it's illegal. They're trying to put together laws. I want to say it was in Illinois, where they've made it a illegal to film police officers and politicians and other officials, quote unquote officials, right? And it makes it a felony. In Texas right now, we've got State Representative Jason Villalba, right? Putting forth HB 2918, which would criminalize the filming and photography, recording of law enforcement officials. So, I mean, across the country, we're seeing legislation like this trying to be pushed forward. It seems like they're scrambling because every day we're seeing more and more of these, whether it's getting pulled over, already arrested in handcuffs, being choked. I mean, we're just seeing so much of what's happening with the criminals that are supposed to be upholding our laws. And it's insanity, man.
It's complete insanity. It's the definition of insanity. I want to say something, because you mentioned different areas where they're restricting filming and where they're making it against the law. And it's important that we remember this. And we did this in Olympia on 12/15/14 with the largest felony civil disobedience rally in history that me and some others headed up over here. And they made it a felony here in Washington in the last election to so much as hand a gun to a friend. You had to have a background check. You had to go through this process. You couldn't even hand your gun to your neighbor to go out and shoot clay pigeons. And it was a felony. And so you see them doing this with cameras. And this key thing, people hear felony and they're like, oh, gasp, felony, we better take away their rights. So they're using this as a tool. First of all, it's completely unconstitutional to take away any free person's rights, regardless of what they've done in the past. If they've paid their debt is paid, just like any other debt. A little bit of a different conversation, but the bottom line is they're using the felony because people will collectively gasp and suffer the violation of their neighbor's rights if the state just says felony. So what they're starting to do is, hey, make everyone a felon, then we can take their guns, we can take their rights, and people will tolerate it. We have to stop tolerating that. And understand this, when they make a law that says you can't film or you have to do this with your guns, the first thing we do is we defy it. And I'm working on a new book about civil disobedience and activism and things like that. And I'm really trying to analyze the methods we've been using and look at what works and what doesn't and what has the greatest effect. Tyranny only works if people tolerate it, number one. Number two, a tyrannical action is kind of like a tree. It has to take root. So if you take it on immediately, and this is what we did with I-594 and the gun restrictions here in Washington, they went into effect on December 4th. We had a rally on December 13th, and we put 3,000 people on the lawn of the Capitol, and we absolutely defied this law. We wouldn't even get permits for the gathering. And we said, no, you don't understand. We're not asking. We're not negotiating. We're showing up here. Get out of the way. And that's exactly what we did. And so we're always feeling like, well, we got to follow the rules. That's the law, especially, believers. I mean, I'm a Christian. There's this mindset of, well, we need to do what government says, Romans 13, this kind of stuff. The principle of obeying government, the people are the government in this nation. So to resist evil and to resist tyranny is obedience to God. It's obedience to justice. And we have to be careful and principled, regardless of where you come down on faith. We always have to be careful and principled about how and when we stand. And I don't want to throw the first punch. Let them abuse us first and then decide how we're going to deal with it. But by stepping up, we nullified, in effect, that law, that I-594 here in Washington. The same when they try and restrict our cameras. If a city, and I've done this, there's some videos out there where I was dealing with the city of Moses Lake, and they were taking down my campaign signs illegally and saying, well, you have to have a permit from us for your free speech. And I would go in there and take them on with the camera. So they made a sign on the city that said no cameras. The first thing I did is I went in there and I absolutely defied it. So if we take on tyranny the moment they enact it, then it hasn't had near as much of a chance to take root. And especially if you do it in mass, you basically make a mockery of them. You say, no, that's not law, because if they pass a law, if this law you're talking about, this representative gets this law through that makes it illegal to film, it's not illegal to film. The legislature doesn't have the authority to make a right illegal. It's not law. It's void the moment it's written. And this goes back to the words of the framers. But I'm talking too much. You guys go ahead.
No, Gav, you're good. You're good. Now, let me ask you a question. You're an activist, of course, and I know you're not necessarily a food activist, but you have to, we're being hammered on many different fronts, as you well know. Is it encouraging to you to see, like, McDonald's come out and say they're not going to do the hormones or the steroids or antibiotics anymore in their chicken, and you see Costco coming out and saying the same thing? There's two types of battles. There's the battle that you wage in that's right there on the front lines, but there's also a battle that we can wage with our pocketbooks, can we not? I mean, that's a huge untapped area. If we just start boycotting some of these companies and telling them, listen, why did McDonald's do it? Because of consumer demand. That's why they did it. Do you think that's an area that we still need to pursue even further, or is that a good angle to go at these people with? Is the pocketbook angle?
I think it's all relevant. I admit that my larger fear is government, not McDonald's. I'm a firm capitalist. And so if McDonald's or any other place, if they want to sell junk food and somebody wants to buy it, go ahead. And yes, if you don't want the junk food, don't buy it. I firmly believe that. I'm a huge coffee guy. I roast coffee. I'm passionate about coffee. I don't go to Starbucks. Not only because their coffee is lousy, but because I don't appreciate what they support. They have a right to support it. They're not government. They have a right to be statists. They have a right to oppose my gun rights. They have a right to oppose justice and liberty and morality. But I'm not going to support it. So I completely agree with you. I think we should be aware, and I think you got to determine, okay, what battle do I want to take on? I mean, at some point, yeah, you got to buy groceries. But I think if somebody's doing something unethical, whether they're, a business or whatever, yeah, we take it on. But I think we also need to remember to keep our eye on the ball. And to me, the ball is liberty here. And so whatever we do, we need to remember the goal of preserving liberty for our children. And I think we can sometimes get distracted by too many things at once and by too many different inroads. I'm not looking to force McDonald's to stop selling junk food. The best way, I think you're exactly right. If you want better behavior, if you want more accountability, we have to bring it about ourselves. We have to speak with our pocketbook. We have to speak with the stands that we make against government, and we have to step up and be willing to sacrifice, which I think is what you're kind of getting at there.
Yes, and Gav, we got about time goes by so fast when you're on. We've got about a minute left before the first hour ends. If you're able to stay over and you want to hang around for 10 or 15 minutes in the next hour, you're welcome to. If not, we want to give you ample opportunity to give out your websites and Facebook page, anything else that you want to get out there. Go ahead, you have the floor. It's up to you. Whatever.
Yeah, I can stay for a few minutes. That's fine. Let's go ahead and go to break, and then we can come back to it.
Awesome. We got about a minute. I wanted to get your input on what's happening with these black sites. We're seeing them in Chicago, and the reports of them in other major cities. But these are places where they are literally bringing people that there is no record. They haven't actually been read their rights or whatnot, and they're just awful allegations coming forth from these. I know a civil suit has just been filed in the Chicago the Homan Square, and but basically, we've heard reports that they're injecting people with heroin and all kinds of craziness, and apparently these are coming to a neighborhood near us. What are your thoughts on these, and what's the best way to battle them? I mean, unfortunately, there was some protesting going on there, but I would have assumed it would have been massive. It was like maybe 12 people. I saw it on RT. Yeah,
but they abducted some of the protesters too. Did you see that?
Oh, I didn't see that. I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, you're right there. Just grab them, pull them right in. So what are your thoughts on these black sites and just, I mean, that's just getting scary, man. That's Gestapo stuff.
Should we take that on now, or do we need to do that after the break?
Let's go. Music should be playing here any minute. So,
okay.
In the meantime, why don't you give out your websites again, Facebook, Twitter, any of that?
Yeah, you know what? CallMeGav.com is the best place to go. You can get to my Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and everything from there, so I'll just keep it simple. You can also donate, where we got money for legal expenses and all the stuff we put into this, so if you want to pitch in, certainly helps out, and you can do that from CallMeGav.com as well.
Awesome. Well, there's the music. We'll be back on the other side, folks. The Liberty Brothers Radio Show. Stick with us. Okay, well, we are back now with Gav. And Gav, I always get your last name mispronounced a little wrong. It's Seim?
Seim, yep.
Seim,
that's right.
We got it this time, okay. And, of course, this is Gav from justcallmegav.com.
JustCallMeGav.com.
Yeah, just as easy as that. Okay, well, just before the break, we were talking about these black sites in Chicago, and apparently they're coming to a neighborhood near you soon enough, just like these FEMA domes that are popping up everywhere. We're seeing or getting reports of these happening. We know there's definitely one in Chicago, and we've heard there are more than just one in Chicago, but the first civil suit has just been filed against this Homan Square black site. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on these and how we might be able to go. I mean, even some of the people who were out protesting got abducted and put into them. So let us know what you think about this.
I think it's terrible, but I think what we need to do, and what I usually try and do, is say, okay, let's step back, let's zoom out a little bit. And in fact, I want to tie the thread together a little bit from the last segment. I think it was Jim that mentioned the food and the companies we support and things like that. And I may have that wrong. I'm not sure who brought that up. Okay. So, and it caught me off guard a little bit because my mind is in liberty, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, hamburgers, which sound good actually, but maybe not the ones over there. So I was thinking about this over the break and how we tie all this together, and it's the same conversation, and I think you're onto something here. Well, we look at all these things that are happening, and I think, number one, we need to think about what we're supporting and what we're putting our money behind. Obviously, if something's bad for you and if it makes you ill, you don't want to support it. But we can take it further from that. We can take that into companies and places that are opposing our liberty, and that's where I really start to get hot under the collar. But let's take it a step further. And what Jim was, to me, inferring is, let's start talking with our pocketbook too, not just with our mouth. And I think we need to do this, in other areas too. I think we need to extend that to liberty itself. And I'm going to say something that's not very popular. We need to stop giving money to the Republican Party. We need to stop giving money to organizations like the NRA. We need to stop giving money to lobby organizations and neuter groups. And I'm not saying that these people never had good intentions or that they never do any good. I'm saying we're in a battle. We're in a situation where America is coming unhinged. And you take our rally in Olympia. The gun groups, they didn't show their face. They would have nothing to do with people actually standing up against the tyranny. In fact, some of them were outright opposing us and trying to cause problems for the rally we had in Olympia.
Go figure.
And so I hate to come out and pick on these names that people think, well, these are our rallying cry. But you look at groups like the NRA and you look at groups like these national gun associations, and I say we start supporting people and businesses as much as possible. Give your money to shows like you guys. Give your money to activists. Give your money to people who are standing up to tyranny in court. I see it all the time, and I see people constantly struggling, and then people turn around and they write big checks to the Republican Party and the NRA. And I'm thinking, you know what? Let's see some evidence. What are they doing for us? I know firsthand the Republican Party is actively working against our liberty.
I mean, it's the same party as the left. I mean,
yeah, it's the
either
same thing.
side. They're both bought and paid for.
Right, and you take the NRA, and yes, they do support our gun rights, and that's good. But where are they when we're out there standing the line at the Bundy Ranch for liberty? Where are they when we're out there standing the line for gun rights in Olympia? I want organizations that aren't running around in D.C. shaking hands and having fancy dinners. I want to support and I want to encourage people to support people that are on the front lines, that are actually standing up. And if you can be there yourself, be there. And if you can't be there, maybe you can give money or whatever it is that you can do. We need to start getting in the game and getting in the battle. And let me bring that forward now to these black sites. We have tyranny all over America. We saw a few weeks ago here in Washington, and Washington's been a hotbed lately because there's an increasing number of people that are standing up in Washington and patriots that are setting an example for the rest of the country. We had there was an event up there that was opposing the federal courts' abuse, and here we are back to the courts. When you mess with the courts, they don't like it. A group of people went up to the federal courthouse in Spokane, Washington, and wasn't a large group of people. Anthony Bosworth was out there, and he was open carrying just out on the pavement, not in the courthouse or anything like that. It was a perfectly legal place to be. And Department of Homeland Security came out, and they arrested him for having a gun there. And so in Washington...
Was he on public land? Was he on the sidewalk? Where was he?
He was on public land. He was basically on, this is a federal courthouse, so they have a big cobblestone area with a fountain out there next to the sidewalk, downtown. It was the outside area, not inside of any secure area, out in the public square, as it were. And so DHS comes out and they arrest him and they take him in and they say, you get no lawyer, your constitutional rights are, this isn't TV, you don't get constitutional rights. They held him and interrogated him for 5 hours, and there was a huge outcry. I mean, because these are people, Anthony was one of the people that worked with me on the I Will Not Comply rally. I mean, we were making calls, the word was getting out, and the word pretty much went out to the sheriff and said, you will get over there and get this guy out, or we'll do it for you. And so the sheriff went over there, and not that this sheriff really supports liberty, but he did the right thing in this case. And so they released him late that day. And the following week, we had another rally there in defiance of what they had done. And so during the course of this, a federal judge makes an order saying, well, I'm banning guns from this square, which number one suggests that it wasn't, they know it wasn't illegal in the first place and that they screwed up. Now we have this federal order. The Patriots showed up there, probably 100 of them, and they totally defied this federal judge's order. Now we come back to, taking on tyranny before it's rooted. What I'm getting at here is whether it's a black site or a federal courthouse or the Bundy Ranch or Olympia, do not pretend for a moment that people aren't being abused constantly all over America. I mean, you want to get into a deep-rooted scheme of corruption and kidnapping, take a look at CPS. Child Protective Service. I mean, you get into all this stuff. So it's not just the feds. It's not just the black sites kidnapping us. And what I'm getting at here in the large sense is I believe there's 3 phases of dissidence against tyranny. The first is protest. The second is defiance. And the third is blood. And I think the first is mostly past in America. These deep-rooted tyrants laugh at us simply standing on street corners and waving signs. That's what they want us to be doing, okay? The second, I believe, is where we are today. We saw it at Bundy Ranch. We saw it in Olympia. We've seen it subsequently. I mean, it's spreading. It's getting more common. Not a protest, but courage and principle and open defiance of tyranny, standing armed and defying lawless regulations and collapsing the ability of tyranny to function. And this is a wire walk. It really is a balancing act. It shows our resolve and our mettle and our character, and we have to be very careful because it's very easy. As you guys were at the Bundy Ranch, right?
Yes, we were. And
so we know that, I mean, we thought the Second American Revolution was going to start that day. And we weren't perfectly organized. If it had, we probably would have been the martyrs that day. And it wasn't that we were so powerful, but the willingness to stand was key. And that's the second, is that defiance. The third is not to be taken lightly, and that's the sword. That's blood. That's revolution.
Well, Gav, I think there's a dynamic that kind of a Rubicon that we pass with Bundy Ranch and what's been happening lately.
Absolutely.
Beforehand, we had seen, time and time again, people trying to exercise their First Amendment right, just getting jackbooted. Whether it's the kids that were sitting arm in arm getting maced, and name the protest and you're going to see it happening. And yet that changes dramatically when the Second Amendment is added to the equation. And, it isn't taken so lightly. You look at Bundy Ranch specifically, the day that they had the attack dogs going after the pregnant woman, and they tackled the older gal that had been just through chemo. Well, they went to that day specifically saying, hey, we're unarmed. We left our pocket knives at home and want to show you that we're here, just peacefully demonstrating. And what did? They sucked the attack dogs on them and stuck ARs in their face. Well, that changed after that, and it changed the whole dynamic. And I think for the country, it has changed the whole dynamic. But you're absolutely right. It is a wire walk, and it's gonna, because once those bullets start flying, things are gonna get real crazy real fast.
Absolutely.
And
if we understand, these three phases of dissidence, let's call them. And I'm a very 1, 2, 3 guy because I'm all about simplifying the message. If we say, okay, we're at this dissidence phase, we may come to resist. We are willing to stand and we're willing to die for liberty, but we don't want to throw the first punch. And like the Bundy Ranch, we don't want to pick a fight. We have seen, like you just said, when you're armed, they treat you very differently. Even if you're not trying to pick a fight, you can keep it holstered, but it does make a lot of difference. But let's rewind to what you just said about the Bundy Ranch, because this was key, and that was a historic event, and it will be regarded as a historic event in history. In fact, I think there's a reunion coming up here pretty soon down at the Bundy Ranch. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it, but it's good to keep this message alive. What changed? When did the world look at the Bundy Ranch and say, that's not acceptable? And we go back to the conversation. And that's when they saw the women being pushed. It's when they saw the people being abused and thrown on the ground. That the message, and I remember this happening. I remember on that Tuesday, I called to figure out what was going on because I was in the middle of a congressional run, and I was activist minded and I wanted to put information out, but I tended to call and personally talk to people to make sure I had the story right. And I called, and it was early enough that Cliven Bundy actually answered the phone when I called his house. About 24 hours after that, we saw these videos coming out, and the mindset changed. People were packing up all over the country, and they were loading up their vehicles, and they were charging across the country like we have never seen since I don't know when. Not in our lifetime, for sure. And that message, that powerful imagery in that message, it goes back to the video, but it goes back to the simple message of these people are being abused. And I want to throw this out there real quick to kind of tie all these things together, because everything we're talking about really comes back to this same conversation of informing people and getting people to stand up for what's right. And I'm going to read a short segment from the book I'm working on. And it's very quick, but I think it condenses what I'm trying to say here. What I'm about to tell you, and this is just reading from the book, is the most important advice you'll receive today, and most of you will ignore it. Condense to the simplest possible form. Condense to the simplest possible form. If people understood this, it would change everything, and even I ignore it sometimes, but always at my peril. And I've learned it works in every aspect of communication, whether visual or written or verbal. And it doesn't always mean short, but usually it does. It means that whatever your topic, you need to make it simpler than you have it right now. And I mean this in every sense, not only in the number of words, but in the way you say it, what you include, how you separate points, the delivery, and the overarching message. So for me, the message is liberty. And you'll hear me say something like this in almost all of my videos, and you'll hear me always redirect the topic of conversation to the topic of liberty. So I'm always working to simplify the message and tie all the loose threads into one umbrella, and I always remind myself and viewers to keep their eye on the ball. It's not about X or Y or Z, it's about liberty. So lots of words don't make us a great speaker. We need less words, more confidence, and more boldness to get the message out there. And I can reach more people with a powerful, concise 3-minute message than I can with a 30-minute one. I can say the same things. And I constantly see us going on complex rants and hour-long videos and writing massive papers and going off topic, and it won't spread the message. People won't digest it, they won't remember it, and until we learn to apply this, your message won't be maximized. And the bottom line is simplify the message every single time. And if this sounds strange, me throwing this in there, because you guys probably know this. I mean, you're broadcasters. You probably understand this. But I'm trying to help us understand how important the conversation is, because that's how we get people to stand up. That's how we get boots on the ground.
You're absolutely right with design and everything else. I mean, I went through several art schools for visual communications, and the same thing. Simpler is better.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's my background is photography, and I teach photography. And a lot of where I get my principles, and I get it in writing and I get it in verbal communication, is one of the most important principles that I teach in photography classes is there's one subject. There's only one subject. Everything else in your piece of art is a supporting cast. And so if you think of it that way, a supporting cast should always point to the subject. In the case of liberty, it's the message. It's what are we really trying to get across? What are we trying to get people to stand up for? And I hear from people all the time that are struggling to get people to stand up in their community. They're trying to get a message out. They're trying to stand, and their hearts are in the right place. What they need to understand is they have to learn to focus on the message and get that message out to people and get people impassioned so that they'll rise up and say, no more tyranny.
You know, Gav, we've got we had someone that's close to the show here that has inside contacts with these drills that are going on. Mm-hmm. What we reported yesterday, and understand, we tried to get the actual person on the phone, but they, for obvious reasons, they don't want to come on the phone. But we had the person that we have that's close to our show has given us great information in the past. What he's saying is the drills that they're running right now are,
now this is out of Texas.
Correct.
Right.
What they're doing is they are training to go door to door and confiscate all the firearms. Right. And they're also training to remove the current legislature in place and put an interim government in its place. You know, an interim government in place there for the community. And the last one, and the kicker, and this is what's freaking all of these people out, is they said at the end of these drills, they're going to have to swear an allegiance to the United Nations. And there are people that are already quitting. They're already quitting, high-level guys that are quitting. Now, we're going to try to get these guys on the air. It's been tough to get them on the air. But what say you about this whole, you want to talk about, removing your liberties, falling under the auspices of the UN. I can't think of anything more damaging to liberty, currently than pulling something like that.
No, and I think that, number one, when it happens exactly, maybe we don't know, but that is where we're headed, is that kind of behavior. I think we need to always remember to stick to that foundation. Remember that law is not what the government says. It's not even what your legislature says. It's not what your sheriff says. Law is what we placed on government, and it's only law if they're operating within the bounds of the Constitution and our natural God-given rights. At anything outside of that. And if the populace understood this, everything would change, because they think, well, Gavin, you didn't follow the law. They gave you an order. That's not law. And so UN troops on our soil, they're enemy combatants. They're not law. They're not allowed, and they're not to be treated as a tolerable or acceptable thing to have happening. The Constitution is clear on how these things are supposed to work. That's the supreme law. So that's my answer to that. But in terms of how we deal with it, there's a really important thing I've been learning in trying to stay ahead of these guys. And one of them is preemption. If we can preempt them, if we can move faster than them, this especially works with the news media. People say, well, we don't want the news media to think we're crazy. And I say, I don't care what the news media says. They're not controlling the conversation. We are. And I say the same thing about the government. The government might run to the local newspaper and say, hey, here's what these guys did. It doesn't matter, because we're not allowing them to control the conversation. We will get out. And if you get out, it's good that this is being talked about. And I think people need to talk about a plan for what are we going to do if this happens? We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to comply. We're not going to obey these people's orders. And you start, before it happens, you take a simple message and you start planting the seeds of, this is what you have to do. I'm looking at you, Texas. I'm getting sick and tired, Texas, of you saying constantly, don't mess with Texas, and you keep letting them mess with you. I want you to put your money where your mouth is, Texas, because out here in Washington, we're standing the line. Out at the Bundy Ranch, we're standing the line. It's time for you patriots in Texas to start stepping up and saying no more, and not just sharing posts on Facebook, but step up, make a plan, and defy the lawlessness and stand the line the moment it happens, get a plan, preempt their plan, put the word out and say, if this happens, here's what we're going to do. Do it with peace, do it with principle, do it with courage. And I'm talking to every other state too, but I like to pick on Texas a little bit because they're always crowing about how free they are. We have to step up and we have to start standing. And if we preempt the tyrant's method, if we allow them to sneak it on us and nobody's aware of it, so preempt it not only by talking about it, but by spreading a simple message of, if this happens, we're going to do 1, 2, 3. This is what we did with Olympia. A month before the election, I put out a video, and I said, they got this I-594 they're trying to pass. Okay? Don't vote for it. Number one. Number two, if it passes, we have to immediately defy it. Number three, this is liberty. We cannot sit down. We have to stand up. And then we followed through with that message after the election, as soon as it passed, before the votes were even in fact. I put out the event. And this is key, the message, the communication, and I'm not trying to say that, like, you know, I'm the only guy that knows this. I'm just throwing out what's worked for us. Immediately putting that out, it's 9 o'clock at night, and I say, well, it's going to pass. What am I going to do? I guess I better hop to this before some neutered gun rights organization says, oh, let's have a protest. So I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not having a protest. We're going to defy it. I made a Facebook event. I put a graphic together for it, and I went to bed. The next morning, I wake up, and 600 people are already going in. I'm like, holy crap, what just happened? If we can get the message out clear and concise and say, we are standing, here's why, and here's how, people do stand. It does resonate. It's not easy, but they do. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
you make a lot of sense.
I have to say, you know, we have had many guests on this program, and I just want to say for me personally, there's very few that have inspired me, but you certainly are one of them, my friend. You
appreciate it.
You absolutely do, man. I mean, what you're saying is spot on. And you know one of the things it comes back to, and you've alluded to it multiple times, the court systems. That seems to be, you know, we had a one single judge here in Montana. The vote was to ban, you know, everybody got together and voted. All the votes were taken to ban gay marriage here in Montana. One judge stood up and threw the whole entire thing out. And then right afterwards, they had their first gay marriage here. So, I mean, there's activism going on in the courts. And, you know, unfortunately, judges have just like, they don't have as much power. They have perceived power. They don't really, the power really is in the people, and it always has been and always should be. But they've hijacked even the de jure grand jury system. They've hijacked the whole thing.
They think they're kings. And I talked to a lawyer that argued in the Supreme Court. He said one of the justices was drinking from a silver chalice. I mean, this is the mindset of these people. And we see this in the courts, and we see this in everybody terrified. Oh, you have to do whatever a judge tells you. No, I don't. I will stand up and I'll tell that judge, who do you think you are? You will obey the law or else. That's what you do to a lawless criminal, even if it means they come and kick you in the head. But you do it with a video camera on so that you can inspire other people to stand, dang it, and to get off their butts and stop drinking beer and Cheetos and talking about their liberty and start actually doing something for it. We must stand up. And I want to allude to what you just said, because you said, well, you know, people are afraid of them. People think they have this power. This is what they are. They're paper dragons. And that's what our government is. It's a house of it's a paper dragons in a castle of cards. And if you understand that, don't think that a paper dragon can't still cut you. But if you understand that it's a paper dragon and you get people to stand up collectively and united against it, even despite their differences, you can change the message. You know, you take something like in Montana. I think it's interesting what Oklahoma just did, because they said, they just passed a bill and said, we're getting out of the marriage game, and they have no place in there. I mean, I'm obviously, you know, I'm pro marriage. I'm a Christian. I believe in God's definition of marriage. But I think they did a really smart thing, because they said, look, this belongs to the family and to the clergy. This is not something the state has any business in. But at the same time, people will say to me, well, Gavin, you don't support liberty because you're not rooting for homosexual marriage. And I'll say, that's not liberty. Liberty is not demanding that the state forcefully redefine what is a purely religious institution. So, I mean, that's a sidetrack.
It's not the government's job to do. It should be between those people and their God, and what, you know, their families.
Get the government out of our lives, for heaven's sake. It's ridiculous.
Gavin, let me ask you this. I know you got to go here pretty soon, and time always flies. We're already at close to 30 past the hour. What do you see if they keep going with this? I mean, we're seeing it on so many fronts, so many things. We're seeing, the devaluation of the money that we do have. We see all these I mean, there are obvious, very clear messages being sent. When you look at the ammo purchases of Department of Homeland Security, you look at all these tanks, you look at the militarization of the police, you look at, now they're looking at getting A-10 Warthogs.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's a message that they're preparing for something. And if we allow this to happen, if we continue to drink our beer and watch Dancing with the Stars, they're going to keep going with it. What do you think that end game could look like? Do you think we might see a financial collapse? Do you think they're going to just try to make it worse than we saw in Germany before World War II? What are your thoughts there?
I think they will continue to keep trampling us until people step up. And I think the question is, will people step up before we are completely devolved into chaos? And this is the key. I mean, people... The people who are quickest to call for a revolution of the sword are usually the ones that never show up on the front lines with you. And so I think that the key here is we have to be willing to do what it takes to defend our children's liberty. We have to, try and take this phase 2 that we're at, this defiance, and use it to the best of our ability, because if we can get people inspired to stand, the government is paper dragons. They're dangerous paper dragons, but if people will stand, it'll push them back. Let's take the ammo. Let's take the guns for a second. Let's take the ban they just tried to put on the ammo that they backed off on because of the pressure, okay?
Okay.
You take... Here's what I would do if I had a lot of money. Unfortunately, us patriots are usually broke. But if I had $30 million, what I would do is I would go to one of these states that has nullified federal gun laws. I will go to them and say, I'm going to let you put your money where your mouth is. We're going to open the biggest ammo manufacturing plant in the country. We're going to put it in your state. We're going to have our own private security there, but you're going to defend us. You said the federal gun laws are void. We're going to use that. We're not going to get any permission from the federal government. We're going to totally defy any of their rules, and we're going to start cranking out ammo. And what we're going to do is, to avoid laws in other states, anybody can show up at the door to our factory and they can buy a pallet of ammo. And that's how this is going to work. And you go to the state legislature who already passed that law, and they're going to be like, well, I don't know about that. And you're going to say, oh, and by the way, we're going to bring $3 billion of revenue in the next 18 months into your state. How's that sound? And so I think we have to start thinking in terms of marketing and the message and making us effective, not with the attitude of we're looking to go start a fight and have a revolution, but with the attitude of defiance and getting people to recognize that the government, the federal government, doesn't define law. We, the people, define law. Defiance changes the game. So if you take somebody and you get a group or an individual that says, there's money to be made here and there's defiance here, let's open the biggest ammo manufacturing plant in the world. We'll sell it to anybody that shows up at the doorstep, and we'll make everything that people need right here, and the federal government will have no say. We won't even ask the permission of the ATF, and if they show up, the local sheriffs in this county are going to arrest them. That's putting their money where their mouth is. We have to start doing bold things, I think, in order to avoid violence. Now's the time to step up while we still can, because like you said, it's going to get worse. They're going to keep coming down on us. But when we stand in mass, when we stand very visible, and this is something that I use all the time, I intentionally make everything I'm doing visible. I call things out before they do them, before I do them. I tell people what's going on. I don't play the game of I'm a covert patriot. And I'm not saying there's never a place for that, but it's very dangerous. I believe it's safer to be open and public. I am a target the size of Mount Rainier here in Washington, okay? But when you're a target the size of Mount Rainier, everybody knows when they start throwing eggs at you. When they start shooting.
I think you bring up a good point. And like Jason said, I know you have to go. Before you go, we want to give you a chance to give out your websites again and any information where people can reach you. But beforehand, I want to let you know, in Montana, I'm not sure if you know, in 2012, and I was delighted, the Montana legislature passed a bill in 2012 that stated any gun or ammo that's manufactured in Montana that is purchased by a Montana resident, within the state of Montana, the feds have absolutely zero jurisdiction. And if they come here and try to hassle Montana residents, they will be arrested, and subject to 2 years in prison and I think a $25,000 fine. So, I mean, there are some pockets of, some good legislatures that are standing up.
Exactly. We're seeing that happen. We have Washington's terrible, but we do have some solid legislators that are trying. It's just such a crazy state. We have some states doing like what you just said, and I was thinking of Montana when I thought about this. And my theory is, okay, let's do it. Let's get some backing. Let's get somebody that's a business investor. Do you realize you could probably do $3 billion in revenue just in 22 ammo right now? You exclude the federal government and all the rules, and you open a 100,000 square foot factory that cranks out 22 ammo 24 hours a day. You think you're not going to sell every bit of it? I mean, there's so much potential there, and the value is huge, not only for liberty, but there's a cause to do it, even for the investor. So I think we have to start thinking outside the box of just standing and waving signs, and we have to start looking for ways to take the bull by the horns, to control the message, to stand up for liberty, and to say, no more, I will not comply, this is law, and it will be obeyed, period. So anyways, I better get running here. I think you guys probably got to go to break, but once again, you can find me, you can watch the videos, you can donate if you feel so prompted. All that's over at callmegav, CALLMEGAV.com, and I always appreciate joining you guys on here.
All right, Gav. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and please keep us informed when you got different things going on, hotspots or whatnot. We'll definitely get it out to our listener base and try to help spread the word as best we can.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, so much. Keep up the fight.
All right.
Thanks, Gav. Appreciate it, man. Great work.
Take care. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.